So our next guest is somebody that I got to know over the last about year and a half. And his name is Ron Kessler. And Ron Kessler has written a dozen books or more. 21 nonfiction books, 21 best-selling author. Started out his career as an investigative journalist. I think he'll correct me if I get it wrong. It's not in my notes here, but I think he was at one of the Worcester papers in Worcester, Massachusetts, if I recall correct. Ron, you'll have to correct me if I got it wrong. But he ended up at the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post for many years. And he had this serendipitous occurrence that he used to spend time in Palm Beach, Florida, decades ago, and met a younger Donald Trump and became friendly enough with him that when he wrote a book about the Palm Beach life there, Ron did. He knew him well, and then he's written another book though that. And by the way, RonaldKessler.com. RonaldKessler.com is a website. You'll see a lot of his writings. He writes columns. He's a journalist more than he is an advocate or someone pushing one agenda. And he's written about the Secret Service and inside the White House. And his recent book about the Trump White House included at the time one of the earliest and longest on the record interviews with Donald Trump. So first of all, welcome, Ron Kessler. How are you, Ron?
Great to be with you. It's an honor. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on. And Ron, before we get to some questions about the Trump administration, what you've seen, what's your thought as a reporter, an observer, about a vacancy in the Supreme Court 45 days before the election? Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, I think all you need to know is that Biden was for filling the vacancy in 2016, and of course that's what Trump will do. He's all about getting results, getting things done. He's not going to fool around, and I think we're going to see a very good new justice on the Supreme Court.
Do you have any doubt that I told someone the commentators were initially saying something like, well, maybe Trump will just say, I'll wait or something. Yeah. Any doubt that Donald Trump's style is like, hey, we got a vacancy, let's fill it. He'll announce it. He'll probably announce it this week, right? In the next few days?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so. Oh, yeah. Yeah. His whole approach is to not let anything be delayed. He's going to move forward. No question about it.
All right. Now, about the Trump White House, your book, your inside look was one of the first inside looks, if I could say it this way, that didn't seem to have an agenda going in saying like, I'm going to make Trump look bad. And so you were describing who were the players and how it was working. At this point, you also have written books about a couple of different White Houses. I guess the George W. Bush was one that was especially. But at this point in the process, how functional, how effective has the White House been?
Well, obviously, there's been a lot of chaos, but it's all Trump. Everybody else is a puppet of Trump, and that's what counts. And of course, we've seen the results. We all know how amazing the results have been. I think, though, that everyone wonders how could he issue some of these comments that are so outrageous sometimes, and his tweets, and at the same time achieve these great results. And I think the best answer to that is an interview I did with Norma Forderer, who was his top aide for 26 years. She really knew him better than anyone on both the business and the professional side. She was the first person that Donald told about meeting Melania. He said, I met this gorgeous woman, and she's a brunette, not a blonde. So, of course, he's always focused on the important things. But Norma said that there are two Donald Trumps. One is the one you see on TV, who makes these sometimes outrageous comments to get attention for his brand, the real estate brand at the time. And then there's the real Donald that only insiders know, and I've been privileged, along with many other people, to know, who's quite the opposite. He is thoughtful, he listens, and as an example of that, you remember during the campaign, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce called for a boycott of his properties. And then about a month later, Trump invited the head of the chamber to meet with him. And that person emerged from this meeting and told CNN, my God, he was not full of bravado. He listened. He was thoughtful. And that's the difference between, the real Donald and what people often see and become revolted by sometimes with his tweets.
We're talking with Ronald Kessler, Ron Kessler, and ronaldkessler.com is the website. You can see his many books, and he's won a bunch of awards. Ron, I've been asking everybody that comes on Eagle Countdown. We've got 15 hours of time together, and I try to ask two questions common with everyone. The first one is, if you look at what Trump said when he was running for office and what his promises were, is there one promise kept that you would say is your favorite or most significant, or most, in the case of you as an observer, as a journalist, the one that is most impressive or jumps out at you? One of the promises he kept in his run up, and then as his administration has moved forward.
I think deregulation would be near the very top. And when he ran for office, people on the right doubted that he was a real conservative. He wrote a book in 2011 called Time to Get Tough, in which he laid out exactly what we wish everyone would understand in this country, which is why capitalism works. And he explained it, brilliantly, addressed all the issues. You remember under Obama, whenever you turned on a financial channel, you would see these CEOs of major companies and small companies complain about the fact that there was so much regulation, and they said over and over again, we can't expand, we can't hire more workers because we're afraid we're going to be deregulated even more. We're going to be regulated even more, and so that's a major clue as to why the economy was so successful under Trump before the pandemic, and and by the way, in that same year, I wrote a story on Newsmax. The headline was, "Don't underestimate Trump for president." So I was ahead of the curve.
You were ahead of the curve. That's an interesting one that you brought up, and I think tomorrow on our Eagle Countdown we'll have a couple of speakers speaking on the energy sector, the impact of a president trying to cut through the red tape. The pandemic, Ron, once in 100 years problem, right? Whatever you think of it, however you think it's managed, it hit everybody, at least in terms of world leaders, in the same way. How do you think Trump handled it? And maybe the media is repeating over and over, it's a disaster. By the way, if you look at all in other parts of the world, they're doing worse. They're relying on us to give them PPE and to give them ventilators and all those things. But still, the president had to basically take everything that he worked for, building the economy, and shut it down and pause the economy. How do you think it's gone?
One thing I look at is the per capita death rate from COVID, and you don't see that much on the media. But
right.
But United Kingdom is worse, Spain is worse, Belgium is worse. So I think that gives you one little clue about how we're doing. Obviously, the fact that he shut down flights from China as well as Europe early on, and Biden said he was a xenophobe. That tells you a lot. The Woodward book is such a laugh when it comes to this supposed disclosure that there was some discrepancy between what Trump was telling the public versus what they knew. Fauci.
By the way, why did he talk to Woodward? I can understand why he talks to Ron Kessler, but why does he talk to Woodward?
He has the attitude that, he doesn't have that much to lose, and maybe he can turn it around a little bit. And again, going back to what Norma Forder said, he just wants to be the center of attention, and that does give him power, and that is part of his strategy. As Donald said about the book, it's rather boring. The first few chapters are about Tillerson, Mattis, all people who had fallings out, and a lot of that material has already appeared. Right. I have tremendous admiration for Woodward and Bernstein and what they did during Watergate. I sat next to them during Watergate at the Washington Post, and every night I saw, every day, what they did. They would be out there knocking on doors until midnight trying to get sources. There was there were threats from the Nixon White House. And they did a very honest job. Now, this book about Trump is just one-sided. I think it is accurate. He doesn't make up quotes. He does rely on reliable sources, but at the same time, if you look for an achievement, you're going to have a hard time finding one. There's one mention of the low unemployment rate, and that's in an interview with Trump. There's one mention of deregulation. That's an interview with Kushner, and that's the extent of his addressing the real importance of the Trump presidency.
Right. We're talking with Ron Kessler, again, ronaldkessler.com. You can see all his different books and columns there. Over on Eagle Countdown, we're on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and everywhere. We're getting some questions. So here's a question, I think, from Facebook to you, Ron. How do you hope, I guess it's phrased this way, do you hope that our country will not fall apart regardless of the election results? And I guess maybe I can extend the question and say, as much as you've seen in your career a contested election, the rhetoric of the Democrats or the left right now about burn it down, they were saying that about if you fill the vacancy, or the number of lawyers the Democratic Party and a Biden campaign have hired, 800 plus lawyers to contest the election, and now early voting and some of the judicial rulings out of Pennsylvania, I think, and Wisconsin, that they might be counting for another 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. What's your observation, Ron, about will the country fall apart at this election? What do you think?
No, the country will survive. You know, I was around in 1968 when there were riots all over the country after the Martin Luther King assassination. In Washington alone, 3,000 buildings were destroyed or burned down. And by the way, President Johnson did use the army to put down these riots. So I look at that. I look at the fact that when Bush was elected, we had an endless judicial controversy going on. So I don't, of course, people are more vocal now, and you see everything on social media now. So it seems more threatening. But and of course, Trump has said he'll put down any insurrection with the military.
We're talking with Ron Kessler. No, I think I agree with you. Although I do think that we're talking about here. I'll get to this next question, Ron. It's not really, and you're a reporter more than you are. A lot of our people that come on are either activists or are issue advocates in terms of policy. But the second question I'm asking everybody, so I'll be consistent and say it to you, is at this moment in the election cycle, what should people be doing? And one of the things I'll just say before I ask you I'll let you answer is. I do think that this is an election where, and the president has tweeted about it, but I ran the election board in St. Louis City 10 years ago for a couple of years. I was appointed the chairman of the board there, and at the time, we constantly recruiting poll workers. This feels like an election where more than ever, if you have the ability, working a poll, a lot of people won't. I can tell you, because of the COVID fears, people will not sign up. I mean, having more people be a part of the process and sort of eyes inside, it seems to me, is a policy. It's a preference that I would express. And we're later on this afternoon, we're going to talk with Catherine Engelbrecht of True the Vote, whose organization is solely focused on getting people involved that way. But back to you, Rana. When you think, 45 plus days, what should people be doing? What should they think about? Maybe in your neck of the woods, where should people go to get the truth? Because you really can't watch CNN, and you really almost can't watch Fox half the time. So what should people do?
I still think Fox is a wonderful source. Of course, they have the other side, and they should, and that just contributes to their credibility. And in the same way with my book, I call it a truthful book, The Trump White House. Because it lays out all these achievements, it lays out how he operates, but it also has some of the missteps and some of the things that make people cringe at times. And I think I back when I was at the Washington Post, if you wrote a one-sided piece the way Woodward did in this latest book, you would be fired. And that's the way I operate. I try to tell the truth, and it's much easier to tell the truth than to make things up.
Ron Kessler, one more. I got a question texted directly to me. You mentioned Melania Trump earlier in the time when the president met her. How does Melania Trump handle all this attention? I mean, I guess she married Donald Trump, and he was famous enough at the time. But I get you knew the first ladies in different other White Houses too. How does she put up with this level of intensity and attention?
Well, she's tough. She's not going to, be cowed by all the criticism. And meanwhile, she's a tremendous partner in the White House. She actually sits in on meetings sometimes. She'll summarize what others are saying. She'll come up with strategy. She is admired by everyone in the White House, and there's nothing that they all agree on. But this is one thing they do agree on, and that is that Melania is a tremendous asset to Trump.
Yeah, it is. I can't imagine the scrutiny is just crazy to think about. I mean, Nancy Reagan, I guess, was famous for paying attention to what they were saying. If you're anyone in these anyone in public life, as we mentioned earlier, in fact, Joe Biden. This is an interesting question for you, Ron, as a journalist. Earlier today, Joe Biden said about the Ruth Bader Ginsburg seat, I'm not going to tell you who I would pick for the Supreme Court because they would get too much scrutiny for the next months, which, of course, the tradition as presidential candidates was to never announce who you would pick anyway. Donald Trump changed that. But the point here is whoever is named this week, and I think you're thinking as the president will name someone this week as the nominee for that, will get a level of scrutiny. On the other hand, almost the person named will become sort of a third part of the campaign, right? It will be Donald Trump, Mike Pence, and so will be likely until the election day a part of the narrative. What do you think the media will do in these next 40 plus days to that person?
Well, the person that Trump wants, you mean?
Yeah.
Because Biden, meanwhile, obviously has a strategy of don't say anything, don't do anything. And that's been his whole approach. But yeah, we see tremendous attacks that we're going to see more and more on anybody on the Trump side. I'm in Potomac, where I'm not going to put a Trump sign out. Of course, that's not my style anyway. But but when you go into rural areas, it's quite different. The so-called working man understands Trump, I think, because the so-called working man has to get results. If he is a carpenter and he puts nails in crookedly, he's going to be fired. And so he understands the way Trump operates, which is to get results. And that's one of the secrets to Trump's appeal.
All right, Ron Kessler, thank you. Best-selling author, ronaldkessler.com. Thank you for the time, Ron, as always, and insight into the Trump White House and the Trump phenomenon and all the rest. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure. So thank you, Ron Kessler. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Ed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, everybody. So we're in the midst of Eagle Countdown. Thank you for coming in.